It all starts in Mobile. What happened day one? Who's on the rise and who's not? This is a special live episode of Locked On NFL Draft. Welcome into the Senior Bowl.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The sun comes out, the sun shines on the field, and you get to see new prospects here in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I'm Ryan Tracy with Aaron Freeman, David Harrison. We are here from Locked On to give you today's updates. Day one, who stood out, who didn't, and where is this all going? It started out as kind of a damp day, a lot of fog, and then boom, the sun came out. It obviously got to me. How did you guys fare out there after it lit me on fire?
It was the American practice was not great at that point. I had gotten about 4 or 5 hours of sun and I was out of it.
Yeah, I mean it was a scorcher, and you know coming from Virginia down here, I left like 20-degree weather to come down here, and I was wishing I had shorts on, and then I made the really bright decision to go up on the second level to watch the O-line drills, which at first I regretted, but. Eventually a breeze came through and that kind of gave me a second life, so I was able to plug through it. But yeah, I mean it's hot. I mean those guys had their helmets off, like they were drinking a lot. And at first I was kind of surprised they allowed them to have their helmets off, but then once the heat really sunk in, I was like, okay, those guys need to let that heat out. And yeah, it was tough, but I mean that's the kind of environment you want to see these guys perform in. So I think it was a good thing for all of them. Yeah,
it's not even July. There's training camp coming. They'll be fine. Yeah. I think what you see there is that it's adaptation. Whether you got here today, whether you expected to be here, whether you expect the weather to be like that, what do you do when you get here to stand out? And I think when you take a look at the quarterbacks in particular, I'm still waiting. Yeah. I don't know, Aaron, did you see anything that stood out to you in a positive way about the quarterback group that said yay or nay one way?
No, not at all. I didn't focus a lot on the quarterbacks, but when I did, I don't think I saw a single pass being completed the whole day. It was just every time a receiver got open, airmailed, and so the receivers are just, what are we doing here, guys? Like, can you hit me on the numbers? Didn't see a lot of that today. So the quarterback group, a little rough start, but we'll see if they can progress over the course of the week and get better as day to day.
I must have been looking at good times. I saw a little bit from Jake Haener that made me think like a guy that came in a little bit lower on the depth chart. Maybe he's going to rise up for me. Dave, did you see anything from him in particular or anybody else?
No, most of my attention was spent on the trenches today. I did, so I actually mentioned to Ross while we were talking pre-show the very first snap. So I was watching O-line drills. They were trying to take a break. So I was like, okay, let me watch some quarterback stuff. I look over at Jaren Hall. He's dropping back, pulls the hand back, and there's no ball. And I said, okay, let me not watch quarterbacks right now, and I'll come back to that tomorrow later on in the week. But of course, it's the nature of the game, right? When there's a lull over here, you look over here, and same thing. I mean, there were when the ball was on target, it was dropped a lot. There were some running back drops, tight end drops, miscommunications where receivers are running down the field and the ball is clearly behind. Like there's not even an opportunity to make the adjustment. We got a chance to talk to Washington Commanders assistant running back coach. She's running back coach here for the national team, Jennifer King, after practice, and we kind of asked her about some of these miscommunications, and I think it was a good thing. She made the effort to clarify, and I think it's important for all the fans, especially to know while they're watching some of this coverage and seeing some of these plays, that these guys literally had their team meetings yesterday for the very first time. That's the first time as a team they ever got together. The next day, they're on a practice field with all 32 teams represented on one side and hundreds of media outlets on the other side, and maybe thousands of Twitter accounts, because a lot of us have 2 or 3 Twitter accounts, depending on your level of engagement, tweeting about everything that they're doing. It's a lot of pressure. There's a lot that these guys are going through. It's not to excuse them necessarily, but there is a grain of salt that these coaches, evaluators, you guys know this, but so I hope that the fans at home also know there's a huge grain of salt being applied to everything you're seeing in Mobile. So as a fan, if you're watching a guy, also apply that grain of salt because it does matter. The last thing about quarterbacks that I want to make sure I do personally, last year was a really good quarterback class here. We got to make sure we lead that last year, I think. Like, don't come into this year. I know last year's draft class for quarterbacks was not all that great, but like the quarterbacks that were in Mobile were better than your average crop, I think. Don't bring that level of expectation to this group because that's not going to be fair to these guys, and I think that could skew the way that we see things.
It certainly can, and that's a comparison that's going to be natural, but we have to remember, I always liken this first jump to that first rookie wall that they're going to see next season. This day 1 to day 2, what can you do to improve? That's going to be the big leap. Folks, if you don't know, you can listen to Dave over on Locked On Commanders. You can also check out Aaron on Locked On Falcons. You can, if you want to suffer through your Super Bowl bound Kansas City Chiefs, you can listen to me over there. But there's always something to be said about that. And when you come back to rookies taking a leap, that's what we got to see tomorrow, especially for the quarterbacks. I thought Max Duggan was clearly, to me, even in the presser before practice, just feels like a guy that is so rooted in college. He still refers to things as a program. I think he's got to take a step out of his shell. I'm waiting for him to realize that this is his chance individually to shine, that he doesn't have to lead a team of his compatriots. This is about his performance, and I'm hoping, and I feel like maybe tomorrow we get more out of him. Do you see that?
Yeah, I think so. I saw some nice things from Duggan at points in this one, and I feel like if anybody's going to shine, he has the opportunity to do so. And I think David made a good point. Like, you had 6 out of the top 7 quarterbacks in last year's draft class at last year's Senior Bowl, and this year maybe 3 of these guys are in the top 7, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, and that doesn't even count Hendon Hooker, who's technically here but not practicing. So it's one of those things where I think Duggan has a chance to really step out of him. And so, as David pointed out, I think that growth from day 1 to day 2 is really where these quarterbacks can really make a name for themselves.
And as we're recording this, they're meeting again. They're working on that chemistry. It is building tonight, as you guys watch this live, that they're trying to come together. If anybody's going to do it, I think it is always a natural progression to see quarterbacks tie in with their tight ends. I thought there was a little bit of good exercise there today from the tight end group. We're going to talk about them a little bit further down the line. But the tight ends are going to help the quarterbacks. I think the running backs are going to help as well. And hopefully everything loosens up, because I really do expect that after the top 2 quarterbacks go in this draft, it's going to be, I think, a little bit more topsy-turvy than everybody thinks right now. Hendon Hooker's a great point, because if he was here, I do believe today would have been better, and I do believe tomorrow would have been better. I think the injury has forced a lot of people to forget about him. So if you put your money on any quarterback here, who is it for tomorrow's practice?
I'm going to go with Hall. Okay. I'm looking for Hall. I want, you know what I mean? And that there's a little bit of selfishness in there, because a lot of Bucs fans that respond to like our Locked On Bucs content, they're kind of eyeing him as a later round draft pick. And I've already had some conversations with other people like Locked On Saints host Ross Jackson about really where Hall's draft stock is going to end. Like, is it going to stay kind of where some people have him now, like towards the back part of the entire weekend, or is it going to rise a little bit? And obviously, reps like bringing your hand back and the ball is laying in front of you is not going to help him, right? But it's just the dynamic that I can't really tap into, that I hope to tap into someday, is like in the media we have like these fast risers, right? Guys that go from like 7th, like 4th round prospects through like Senior Bowl combine, and I wonder sometimes, do the scouts already have those guys for? So they see us, and they're like, "Oh yeah, fast riser. You mean the 4th round guy, the 3rd round guy that we've had labeled that way since October? Good job, media guys, because we're not in the meeting rooms, you know what I mean, and we're not seeing what they're seeing, and we don't evaluate the team the way that they evaluate the team. So there's a level of fairness there. But I am curious, because every year it happens. There's always a guy that, I mean, honestly, at one point, Brock Purdy last year, like there was times during the last collegiate season where people were like 3rd, 4th round pick. And then all of a sudden he's Mr. Irrelevant, and then all of a sudden he's almost going to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, these things have a way of ebbing and flowing. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how specifically these quarterbacks come out of the Senior Bowl and then through the Combine, through the Pro Days, and by the time we get to April, where these guys sit.
Well, I was going to say not Jaren Hall. So, you know, we're opposite on that one, just like we are when we're doing our Locked On Bucs, Locked On Falcons crossovers. I'll go with Jake Haener. You talk about Brock Purdy, right? And every draft show I've heard over the last week or two has been who's going to be the next Brock Purdy. And a lot of people have looked at Jake Haener as that guy. And so I'm curious to see if he lives up to that billing as a guy that, again, you know, Brock Purdy didn't exactly, you know, show out in a major way in the pre-draft process to rise up those draft boards that David's talking about. But I'm curious if we can see some of those glimpses of Jake Haener just being kind of a playmaker, whether that's in practice or later in the week when we get to the game. That's what I'm going to be looking for in the coming practices.
Well, I like his opportunity because clearly no one's stepping up and taking it by the reins yet. And like we said, 2 hours of practice each team so far. It's just the very beginning. But I expect that starter's whistle to go off tomorrow. First period, they got to get after it. That's what I'm hoping as well. I really don't have a feel. I just want someone to emerge because I think after the first couple of tiers of quarterbacks, if you're talking day 3 guys, I think it's a wide open field and somebody has to go take that. It might as well be a senior. And I think this is the perfect opportunity. The whole reason that we're here is because it is the opportunity that it is. So who can help them? We have to move on to some other positions that I think are really a little bit undervalued right now because this running back group in particular is really, really good top to bottom. I think performance-wise, these are guys that are going to help those quarterbacks. I personally have a favorite. I'm not going to give that away yet. You listeners probably already know. But let's start with you, Aaron. If anybody stands out at the running back that can not only help move the ball down the field on the ground, but actually matriculate to the league in a way that they're looking for a modern running back to be, who is it?
I like Rashawn Johnson. He didn't get a ton of opportunities at Texas because he was behind some guy named I think it's Bijan Robinson.
Who's that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Bucks fans know who that is.
I don't know if you heard of that guy. And so he's one of those guys I think is very interesting in this draft class to see sort of where his stock is because he's kind of, I think he was a high school quarterback type of a guy, but a bigger guy, more physical guy. And I'm curious to see how he stands out in terms of some of these pass catching drills because they will put you through the test in the Senior Bowl. And if you can't, hang in on third downs, that will get exposed over the course of the practice week. So he's one of those guys I'm keeping an eye on.
Dave, I assume you feel the same because Bucks fans are just waiting for it?
I'm actually going with a different guy, and I'm going to say this name, and Ross Jackson is not going to laugh at me. Tajay Spears. And so here's a little inside joke on this. We've had some conversations about mispronouncing player names, and Tajay is a guy that I had to work on a lot, and these guys are not helping me work on that because I say it, and they're like, no, it's TJ. It's something different. And I'm just like, guys, you're killing me here. But I watched a little bit of him today. Again, his first day, huge grain of salt. But I thought I saw a little bit of J.D. McKissick. And I say a little bit because they're not clones, and player comps kind of get crazy because people, sometimes we take them too literal. But when I see is a guy that potentially has some pass catching ability, but also has some running ability, probably not between the tackles. But you look at a team like the Washington Commanders, they don't need that between the tackle guy. They've got Brian Robinson. They've also got Antonio Gibson who can do a little bit of both. But then J.D. McKissick was really kind of their pass catching running back, former wide receiver converted to running back. So I'm kind of wondering if Tajay can kind of be that guy, but then also maybe still have an element of versatility to him because J.D. McKissick, unfortunately, has a pretty significant neck injury that we think then I don't know what the future of his career holds, but I do know that the Washington Commanders like to have that multi-back system and they love having the two backs, but they would love to have the third. So depending on, again, where his stock ends up by the end of this entire process, when we get to April, he could be a guy that if he's available at the right spot, could see him land in the DMV.
I do like the idea of him growing into a bigger role, too. He doesn't have to walk in and be a bell cow. Let's get in there, see what you got, get used to the level of competition. I think that's a great role for him. I love the fact that Rashawn's got low mileage. I'm looking for a bargain car right now, and that's what I'm looking for. I'll tell you the guy that stands out to me, and I've been a fan of his for a while because I think the projection to the league and everything that you have to do in it is maybe the most that I've been excited about a running back. And you listeners know that I'm not exactly big on the running backs in the top 100, but Kenny McIntosh makes me happy in ways that I probably shouldn't admit out in public, but I think I can see him on the field for a team that I like and hopefully not for one that I dislike, making big things happen. Do you guys put any stock into the Georgia players in particular having an advantage about having played all the extra games, 2 back-to-back national championships, and having that experience, playing through the rookie wall possibilities next season? Does anything ring for you?
I think there's something to that, you know what I mean? And I don't think it's kind of like an automatic – they're not going to have the rookie wall. They're not going to have those problems because that's, to a different individual, that's just not fair to kind of expect that, right? But I think we see from some of these Power 5 guys, and again, I'll reference Brian Robinson Jr., for example, coming out of Alabama, like watching him through the year. Now, granted, some people say, well, he also missed the first chunk of the season, but he missed the first chunk of the season because he got shot in the leg. So it's not like he was just resting and relaxing. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a kid who, yes, he kind of jumped into the season a quarter of the way through, but he was fully rehabbing and not even fully physical by that time. But by the time you see him get to the end of the season, like if the Commanders find a way to sneak into the playoffs, he's still got juice. You know what I mean? And that's a guy who can still go. And I think that's a testament a little bit to some of these programs and what they're doing. Because I don't think some people understand like some of these small time colleges that people will kind of scoff at almost and be like, oh, you played at that school. Like if you went to their facilities, these are state-of-the-art facilities. There was a specific school, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there was a specific school that some people were kind of trashing on Twitter, and somebody came back, clapped back, and was like, oh, you mean this school where Olympians train? That school that you're clowning on? Like, you know what I mean? So I think the sports medicine, the science, and the way that these guys approach their careers as student athletes is changing the way that the rookie wall hits some of them, not all of them.
Yeah, I think, I got to give a shout out to my guys, Clinton Daniel at Locked On Bulldogs. Georgia's one of those programs, like you talk about the science of it, right? But there's also that mentality, right? And Alabama was known as being that sort of, they're training you to be a professional football player, right? And I think Georgia has kind of taken that over, and certainly the way that they ended their season this year, they look like a professional sports team playing a college football team with what they did to Max Duggan and those TCU Horned Frogs. So I do think a player like Kenny McIntosh, I know he cramped up during practices today, so he wasn't able to show his full stuff, and hopefully he'll be no issues for the rest of the week. But I think some of these Georgia guys do have an advantage, not only from the physical standpoint, but also a mental standpoint.
I purposely let you go last because, you have a little bit of inside knowledge there, right? Outside of Kenny, and we'll talk about my proclivity for him later, did anybody stand out for you, positive or negative, from that particular program now that we know they have to make a transition and they're the last team to play?
I wanted to keep an eye on Warren McClendon, the Georgia right tackle. He's wearing number 77 for his late teammate Devin Willock in honor of him. And I saw some positive things from him in practice today. So that was one player that stood out, and I'm very curious to see how he handles the rest of the week. But he's a young player that I'm a big fan of. I think he's just a gritty, hard-nosed offensive tackle, one of those guys that may not be the best athlete or anything like that, but he's going to wind up starting 10 years in the NFL.
He's on my list of performers today, too. And we need to talk about our top performers. We should probably keep it with that positioning group, right? I was watching O-line quite a bit. I think both of you guys were, too. So let's just dig into it. I think the tackle class is deeper than we thought. It may not have the top end, but I think it's there. And I think several guys showed out today. I was impressed with a number of dudes. Bergeron was one. McClendon was another. I think both of them played probably better on par than I expected on day one, and I hope that they can raise their level. If you had to pick one top performer, it doesn't have to be on the line or anywhere else, but who was your guy?
I liked Jalen Duncan. Jalen Duncan out of Maryland, the offensive tackle for the national team. He went into this season with a lot of buzz. A lot of people were thinking maybe this guy could be the first tackle off the board, and he didn't really put together the season that he needed to sort of confirm that, and all that sort of top 15 first round buzz kind of disappeared and fizzled out this year. And, kind of was looking like maybe a day two guy, maybe one of these athletic, swing tackle types that you can develop down the road. And so this Senior Bowl, I think, was a great opportunity for him to kind of show, okay, like all that hype that I was getting 6 months ago is worthwhile. And I think he came off looking very good on this opening day alongside several other of those standout offensive tackles for that national squad on today. So I think this was a great day one for Jalen Duncan.
Yeah, and you can never have enough tackles, right? Is there a tackle on your list, or who's your top performer from today?
Yeah, it's Dawand Jones, and I mean the Ohio State tackle, and it's kind of low hanging fruit because he's arguably the highest rated. I mean, depending on there's a couple of other O-linemen that some people may have rated a little bit higher, but for the most part, Dawand Jones is kind of the guy. And I mean, as soon as you step into the stadium, like that dude is massive. You know what I mean? And we've all seen some players where it's like, okay, you're listed at this, but you're not that. Like Dawand Jones, like he might be listed short. I don't know. Like maybe he was slouching. like that is a big man. I will tell you right now. Like if he ever steals my car, I may just say, okay, like we're just gonna write that off. That's not an invitation. Please do not steal my car. But he's just massive. You know what I mean? And you saw it in the drills, and even sometimes there was a time where one of the pass rushers, I want to say it was the edge defender from Clemson, really kind of got on him quick, and you could just tell like Dawand was not ready for that speed, but he kind of just kicked his feet back in a way that most linemen are probably eating grass. But this dude is just so big, and I mean, and he just kind of hops back a little awkwardly, but then you just see him just go like, no, you will not pass, and like you won the rep. Like as an edge defender, you won, you beat him, and you still didn't get to the quarterback. It's like simulated or otherwise, you still didn't get to the quarterback. Now, my question is, and what I want to watch for the rest of the week, because he was getting coached up. Because and you guys are familiar, and Ryan, I know you have an O-line background. Like, the technique is important, especially as you get to the National Football League. That technique is going to be important, and he was getting coached up a little bit. I want to see how much he starts to kind of adjust to that technique, and I'm really curious because national team defensive line coach Ryan Kerrigan knows a thing or two about getting past some guys, and I'm curious to see if maybe he doesn't take this opportunity to do some things. And let's test Dawand during the practices and especially during the game. Let's see if the American team does some things to maybe try and test Dawand Jones and his limitations. I hope they do, because it's only going to make Dawand better, and it'll give the scouts on hand and the coaches who are dealing with them a better idea of who he is as an NFL prospect.
Yeah, I thought Dawand stepped up today too, a little bit better. I was actually came away pleasantly surprised with Darnell Wright from Tennessee as well. I thought he was a guy that didn't really show his power very well on a lot of the film that I watched, but I thought he was all over the place today. He maintained his pad level better than where it has been, closer to where it needs to be. It's not all the way there, but he was another guy. But for me, the winner of the day, especially in the trenches, was a small school guy, and I generally have a bias that I really want it proven. If you're coming from a smaller school, that you can step into this ball game and compete. Cody Mauch did that, and I don't care if you call him a tackle or a guard. He could play for me today. I'm happy with that. And at the end of the day, it's about moving your feet and being able to recover. Nobody wins every rep. You have to be able to engage, sustain that contact, and adjust. And I thought his feet are what saved him a couple of times. But his ability to control his core and really get bent and recover, I was impressed with that, more so than I expected to be, to tell you the truth. So did you guys see anything about him in particular, Aaron, that stood out to you, or am I seeing things?
No, I think you're dead on with Cody Mauch. He played left tackle, and today he played left guard. And this was basically the first time he had been playing guard, from what I heard, since his freshman year at NDSU, where they were just kind of giving him a couple of practice reps. This was his first real practice at left guard. And if this is sort of him, breaking his cherry, did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a winner. I mean, and he might have been the most consistently good lineman on the field today. And he's another guy. I saw him lose a rep to the Arizona State D tackle during teams. So this wasn't one-on-ones, this is during teams. So he loses the rep, he overextends, and does exactly, get that arm out of here. You know what I mean? You reach, I teach, get that arm out of here. And Cody literally just took his shoulder, drove it into his chest, and said, cool, you're still not getting through this gap. And still pushed him down and washed him out. I was like, how does this dude miss on a reach and then still wash this guy out with his shoulder? You know what I mean? Like, to me, one, physically, that's just impressive. Two, mentally, because like it's not over. The rep's not over. I still have tools. As long as there's a part of my body I can put on you, this isn't over yet. And then we saw some other things where guys, the rushes kind of went wide out. So now he's got kind of a 2-gap assignment, and you see it. Guys got a wide wingspan, and usually what happens, someone knocks that hand out of there, gets through, and he didn't. He was in the mental acuity, the fluidity of him to read the defense he was going on and shift, and then seeing him shift from like an inside read, going to the outside and just fire off to help his tackle, like it was just incredibly impressive. And again, you want to see growth from the second day, but it's almost like he's in a position where it's not necessarily growth because you saw a lot of great things. Just see it again and then again. Yeah. And it reminds me of not a lineman, but Christian Watson last year. Came out first day, balled out. So, okay, let's see second day. Balled out. Third day in monsoon rain. Okay, we'll give you a little bit of credit for drop passes. No drop passes, which is why it was really surprising when he dropped his very first pass in his NFL career. It's like, dude, come on, man. But you know what I mean? But obviously he bounced back, had a very, I think, solid rookie season. So, again, Cody's just another one of those guys that proved it early. And now you want to see him continue to prove it as the week goes along.
Well, and I'll tell you the other thing that I want him to prove is I see him, especially after moving into guard, as a guy that can be – hard to compare him to an all-pro, but be that force multiplier to help your tackle. Because one thing that I want to see tomorrow is I want to see Blake Freeland play better, and I think that's going to help. I do want to see that from him. I want to see the edges show up. You mentioned KJ Henry, not by name, but a guy that I came to watch specifically, especially with Tyree Wilson not here. And I think KJ's got a good, solid game now, but he's got the athleticism to really take it up a level. He may be a guy that sprouts after he gets to the league with a little bit different coaching. We saw an inside spin move from him. I saw an arm over from him today, a guy that I'm going to be definitely watching tomorrow. But Aaron, who are you going to watch tomorrow? What do you need to see?
I want to see these pass rushers, right? We talked about the offensive line. I kind of want to focus on the pass rushers to see what they can do in this arms race as they compete. You adjust, I adjust, that sort of thing. So tomorrow I want to see these pass rushers. Derek Hall is one that I'm going to keep my eyes on. He's built very similar to a player the Falcons just took in round 2 this past year in Arnold Ebiketie. But Hall's a little bit more power while Ebiketie was a little bit more speed. And so I want to see him show that power, going up against guys like Matthew Bergeron and some of these other guys on that American team. So he's going to be a guy I'm going to keep my eye on.
All right, Dave. Who you got tomorrow?
I'm glad you brought up Blake Freeland. Actually, he's a guy that I came into today really hoping to see some good things from him. I kind of pre-eyed him as a guy who could actually rise, and he did have some struggles. And at one point, they moved him to the right side during teams, and he did worse. And that doesn't bode well, because if you're struggling on the left and they move you to the right, and it's just worse, okay, well, now where do we put you? You know what I mean? Now, it's just day one. The Arizona State D tackle looks undersized a little bit, but today he got some wins on some guys, and he's not really a highly touted prospect, so it's okay. But tomorrow they're going to know you're coming. Like today, maybe they didn't know you were coming. Not trying to be disrespectful to you, but maybe they just were sleeping on you a little bit. You made some guys look a little foolish today. I want to see if they do. But there's one, Logan Paulson, former Washington tight end, was down there, and he's really interested to see the Cincinnati tight end. And if he's interested to see him, well, I got to be interested, especially because, again, Locked On Commanders fans will know this, but our listeners will know this, fans of the Commanders, that the tight end group isn't necessarily locked in for the Washington Commanders, especially with Logan Thomas and some health issues that he's had. So if this guy balls out, and if Logan Paulson kind of puts him on the radar for the Washington franchise and out there in the mix, that could be a guy that you see potentially get targeted by the Commanders going on. But, I mean, he's got the dimensions. He looks every bit of the part. So if he can do some things in the passing game and he can show some blocking skills, every NFL team is looking for that next Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, whatever you want. And if he can prove to have a little bit of that. I remember Noah Gray when he was here out of Duke, showed a little bit of flash. Like, you've seen that he can block and he can catch. Doesn't do anything amazing. And now the Kansas City Chiefs took him and said, you know what? Let's tap into what you can do, and let's make it amazing because of our scheme, and it's working.
Yeah, it is.
I like how I pointed out Noah Gray to you, Locked On Chiefs host. Like I don't know if you heard of this guy.
I'm really impressed. Hey, you can keep doing that because I'll take all the hints I can get. But I will tell you this, too. The tight end group's been lauded, but not only did I feel encouraged about Luke Musgrave, because I can sense maybe a little bit of hesitation. He didn't play much this year. He's coming off of an injury. But I like what I saw. He's aware in zone, and I think that's going to be a key for him going forward because he just doesn't have those reps to finish off his career. But the guy that stood out to me was Allen from Clemson. I didn't expect to be happy with him, but he made a couple of catches that I really liked, and I thought he was getting loose enough to make me happy. He went against one of my favorite players, another Georgia Bulldog, and Chris Smith, that I was really happy with. I thought he played tenacious for his size. He's going to get knocked for that size quite a bit. But especially in man on tight ends, I thought he came away on the day generally holding up really well. I'm happy about him. I have a few more notes, but I can't get to them all. So last thing, who's your number one guy coming out of today that you have to see really take his draft stock by the throat tomorrow?
It's got to be Mauch. I mean, Dawand is the guy, you know what I mean? But, like, Dawand more so did what you expect him to do. But I think Mauch has to, like, tomorrow is, like, his day to really take this thing by the throat. Who was it, Meinertz, a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Like Quinn. Yeah, Quinn. Like, he could be this year's Quinn.
Yeah.
Meinertz.
Yeah, Dawand's fun to look at just because of the physical dimensions. Just seeing a human being that size, and 375. It's like, okay.
I'm gonna go stand next to him tomorrow. Like, I didn't see him on the field today. Tomorrow, I'm just gonna go walk by him.
Yeah,
like,
please.
I'm not gonna say anything to him. I'm just gonna go walk by him and open my car.
Please let us see that. So yeah, he's up there. But yeah, I think Mauch is the guy. I think these offensive linemen, really have an opportunity to kind of dominate the week because this is usually a setting where it's the defensive line that gets the advantage in a lot of these one-on-ones, and so I think the offensive line has a chance to step up.
For me, it's if you're going to take stock of being here, you have to take over your destiny. That means grabbing it by the throat. And for me, I'm waiting. I'm going to name a whole position group because I need a wide receiver to show up and tell me I got to take him. I need him on a roster. I was hoping it was going to be a particular guy. I'm not going to give that away. We'll see if he steps up tomorrow. But, folks, we'd like to know what you think. Leave your comments about who you're watching day 2 and who you want to see the rise from. We will have all kinds of information for you from the Senior Bowl. Hey, day 1 in. I should recover from the sunburn about March. It'll be fine. We're all going to have a good time. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and sub to this channel wherever you see this. Thank you guys for all of your insights. And thank you, Ross Jackson, for producing this show. I'm Ryan Tracy. Appreciate you guys. We'll catch you next time.